Hello and welcome back to Ready Steady DIY. Today we're going to take a look at a sander from Makita, the BO5041K. We're going to open up the box, we're going to see what comes with the kit, we're going to put it through its paces, and I'll let you know what I think. It's random orbital sanding day here on Ready Steady DIY, so let's get down to it. It's pretty difficult to run any kind of DIY project and not run into having to sand something at some point. Not everybody's favorite activity, but I gotta say, when you're done, if you did it right, sanding can be really satisfying. So when you're out there looking at sanders, you'll probably run into Makita. Makita is a Japanese company. They've been around since 1915. This is a random orbital sander, so that differentiates it from other sanders. Something like a belt sander is gonna take off a ton of material. It's going to work in one direction only, and it's going to be really hard to finesse that. Idea with the random orbital sander is that it moves the grit of your sandpaper around in such a random pattern that it never moves in the same way twice. In this case, the sanding disc that you apply to the sander both spins and oscillates. That allows the grit to move much more smoothly across the surface that you're sanding and lets you have a lot more control. This particular model of random orbit sander sells both bare as a tool and as a kit. Obviously, I bought this one as a kit. The difference between the bare tool and the kit is about $20 US. I find that if I buy a tool with a case, even though the case is bigger than the tool, it actually ends up taking less space because you can stack cases on top of each other or just keep things a little bit more orderly on the shelf. In this case, for me, it was worth it. Sometimes you can find the kit on sale and that really makes it worth it. Inside the box, once you open it, you'll find the front handle which detaches, you'll find the case, you'll find the sander itself, you'll find the dust bag, you'll find one sheet of 8-hole sandpaper, and you'll find the instruction manual. You should read that. It weighs 3.1 pounds and it is 8 5/8 inches long, 4 7/8 inches wide, and 6 inches tall. Like most power tools, this one is a double insulated tool. The cable that comes with it is an 18 gauge cable, about 7 feet long. At 7 feet long, the plug is probably long enough to use on your tool bench, but if you're using it outside like I am, you're gonna need an extension cord. The manual recommends if you're gonna use a standard 25-foot cable that it be 18 gauge at least, that you shoot for at least 16 gauge if you've got a 50-foot cable, and if you need to go 150 feet, they recommend a 14 gauge cable. As you can see from these shots, I've got a ton of 12 gauge cable lying around from my work, so I just use that. Incidentally, if you want to know how to coil a cable, I've got a video on how we do it in the film and television industry. Here's a link. The tool draws about 300 watts, so that means it's powerful enough. The speed dial, it goes from 1 to 5. I find that I most often run it at 5. It meets my needs at 5. I don't often wish it went to 6. Let's put it that way. So the 5041 takes 5-inch sanding discs. They attach with a hook and loop system. It's basically Velcro. And it's pretty easy to attach. There are 8 holes. You just line up the 8 holes on the sandpaper with the 8 holes on the sander, and the disc will be centered, and the holes will be open in order to suck up the dust into the dust collection system. Certainly sanding sheets for like a quarter sheet sander would be cheaper, but this system works pretty well and is pretty convenient. Obviously, any Velcro or hook and loop system will eventually fail. You probably don't have any Velcro on a jacket or a shoe or anything like that that hasn't gotten to a point where it doesn't work anymore. When that happens with this sander, you would have to replace the pad. I've been using mine for 6 months. It's still just as grippy as when I got it. On the upside, I find the 5-inch discs are a perfect radius for the kind of jobs that I do. It's not necessarily for large jobs. If you had to sand a floor, I think you'd be there a while. But for most of the jobs that I do, it's sort of on a tabletop, smaller pieces of wood. This works great. So as you can see, there is a speed control. It goes from 1 through 5. Speeds 1 and 2, according to the manual, are meant for polishing. Speeds 2 through 4 are meant for finish sanding, and speeds 4 to 5 are meant for regular sanding. Obviously, you would slow it down if you were sanding a material that was sensitive to heat, like plastic or acrylic. Kind of an interesting point, they also sell a waxing pad and a buffing bonnet. I presume you would slow it down for those things too. The trigger is really wide, so it's pretty easy to hit. There's a trigger lock. It's a little bit fumbly, but it does work quite well. I guess if you're sanding for long periods of time, that would reduce fatigue. It just depends on if you're comfortable locking your tool into the on position or not. Not everybody likes doing that. I guess if you're careful, no problem. One thing I will say about this trigger, I really like it a lot better than the trigger on my DeWalt quarter sheet sander. It uses a rocker switch kind of solution on the front of it, and I find it's really easy to not realize it's on or to half turn it off and then put it down and have the impact of putting it down, turn it back on again. The Makita it's way better. When it's on, it's on. When it's off, it's off. Even when I lock it, I know it's locked. I feel a lot more confident with the trigger on the Makita. than I do with the trigger on my DeWalt quarter sheet sander. One other interesting thing about this particular sander is the grip is a little smaller than other sanders, and the design of it is, they call it ergonomic. Everything is called ergonomic. Really, it does feel a lot more comfortable in your hand. So if you had to use just one hand to control the sander, your ability to do it for longer periods of time is increased by the fact that it's just more comfortable in your hand. I don't have really big hands, but it feels good in my hand. Generally speaking, it feels like it has less vibration than my DeWalt quarter sheet sander too. Of course, the great option with this sander is that you can hold it with two hands as well. There's a front handle that is detachable that comes with the kit. It's really easy to put on and take off. There's just a little knob, you attach it, you turn it, you lock it on, and then you can turn it to whatever position you want. That allows you to move your right hand back towards where the trigger is and keep your left hand on the front handle. And that moves your hands away from the source of vibration and makes it even easier to hold. The fact that the handle can spin makes it easier to use if you're sanding inside of a cabinet or a drawer, or if you're sanding a floor near a wall and you need to spin the handle away. It's pretty convenient. It's also good for putting it away. You can spin it right back to the back, stick it back in the case. So as mentioned, the 8-hole system does suck up the dust, and it does a pretty good job of that. Every time I've sanded with this sander, I open up the dust bag and I'm impressed by how much is in there. I generally sand outdoors. I don't use a dust control system because I'm not often indoors. If you did want to use a dust control system with this one and not use the provided bag, you're going to need some kind of adapter to go to your shop vac or whatever it is you use. There are adapters available. I like using the dust bag though, especially outdoors. It seems to do the trick. As you can see, I did a little sound test here. It's kind of weird doing a sound test outside. It's basically 50 decibels just when everything's quiet. As you can see from this little test, the Makita is basically just as loud as my DeWalt quarter sheet sander, but for some reason, to my ear, it sounds quieter. I don't know why that is. It's a different tone, whatever. My gut instinct says if I had difficult neighbors, they would probably complain about the DeWalt sander before they complained about the Makita sander. If that matters to you, that's kind of a thing. Don't get me wrong, you still have to use ear protection. So in the end, I think you can tell I like owning this tool. If you don't have a sander and you wanted to do some DIY stuff, that's gonna be pretty hard. If you just hand sand stuff, it's not impossible, but it's tough. Some kind of power sander is a pretty good idea, and I think a random orbital sander is probably the first one you should look at. The 5041 is comfortable, reasonably powerful, and pretty convenient to use. I would say if you're looking for your first sander, this might be the one. Your best course of action, go into a big box store and put it in your hand and see how it feels. If it feels good there, it's probably gonna feel good working with it on your bench. So hey, do you have a 5041 you can comment on in the comment section? If you have it, let me know what you think about it. Also, please feel free to like, subscribe, hit that thumbs up button. It really helps the channel out. And otherwise, until next week, take care, stay safe, have fun with your DIY projects, and I'll catch you next Saturday.